A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, the Hedge Knight, is annoying to say. The shorter, better term to use is Dunk and Egg. No, not Dunk and Egg, Dunk and Egg, the show's two main characters. The third Game of Thrones HBO series ever will premiere January 18th, 2026. Unlike House of the Dragon, a full-length series featuring 8 episodes per season now, Dunk and Egg will be a limited series, with only 6 episodes per season. But that's okay because the source material it's based on isn't a set of 5 dense novels or 1 dense fake history book. It's these 3 little novellas published in 1998, 2003, and 2010, respectively. Back before all the late-night TV appearances and convention panels,
I'm still working on the book,
and HBO series meetings, these Dunk and Egg stories were how George R.R. Martin procrastinated working on A Song of Ice and Fire.
That's interesting.
I'm kidding, of course. George isn't procrastinating The Winds of Winter. He's probably just stuck. If you knew how to finish it, it'd be finished. Instead of anger, let's try compassion towards the old man. But speaking of unfinished writing, let's get back to Dunk and Egg. This video will give you all the basics about the new show, since the timelines can get a bit confusing, but I won't spoil anything either. This series takes place in Westeros from 209 to 212 AC, during the reigns of Daeron II and his son, Aerys I. If you don't know who they are, I have conveniently made videos on every monarch in Targaryen history, so you can consult those if you want, but I think there's spoilers in them. And since you're here, please check out my new second channel, Crusader Chris 2, where I'll be uploading gaming stuff like GeoGuessr and probably some CK2 A Game of Thrones, and exclusive stuff from my Patreon after patrons have already had access to it for a while. Here's a quick little taste. Or like Bangladesh, right? Doesn't Bangladesh do a little bit of English? Don't they get a little bit frosty with it? Put me in Bang. I don't believe in it, but put me there. I'm insane. I'm just insane. Wow, that was awesome. Now back to the video. Basically, House of the Dragon will end around 131 AC, and Game of Thrones doesn't begin until 297 AC. So Dunk and Egg is set here, a good 80-ish years after Rhaenyra and Daemon, and another 80-ish years before Daenerys and Jon Snow. For reference, Ned Stark is born in 263, Tywin Lannister in 242, and Walder Frey in 208. Baby Walder actually makes a cameo in The Mystery Knight, and along with a young Maester Aemon, they're the only non-magical characters from the main series who were alive during Dunk and Egg. By the way, Aemon is like 13 at this point, studying at the Citadel. We definitely won't see him in Season 1, but there's a chance he makes a cameo later on. We're in the time period after House Targaryen loses its dragons, so their power derives simply from the status quo. Aegon's conquest was 2 centuries ago at this point, so nobody really remembers the time before Targaryen rule. In House of the Dragon, they've only ruled Westeros for like 100 years when the show begins. We open on King Jaehaerys, who was only the 4th Targaryen king ever, and whose grandfather was Aegon the Conqueror himself. Daeron II is the 12th Targaryen king. He was born the same year the last Targaryen dragon died. Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon are high-concept, wide-lens series. They span the entire continent of Westeros, featuring plots and characters that evolve season over season. Politics, court intrigue, battlefields, that isn't the point of Dunk and Egg. This story is more character-driven than ever, and Ser Duncan the Tall is the main character. It's his show and his story, so the format will be different compared to what we're used to. Duncan the Tall isn't a lord or prince or king. He's barely even a knight.
It's a hedge knight, ain't it? What? It's like a knight, but sadder.
Hedge knights wander up and down Westeros, taking employment wherever they can get it. Instead of being sworn to one lord, like how Ser Vardis Egen is sworn to House Aerion, hedge knights swear their swords to a lord for however long their services are required, and then they move on to the next lord who'll hire them. They are contract employees, or security consultants, I guess. And they also compete in as many tourneys as they can because that's also work that can pay for their food and horse and armor and stuff. And also doing well in a tourney will boost their recognition and make them a desirable hire. We read about Hedge Knights from all over Westeros competing in the Hands tourney in book and season 1. And plenty of Hedge Knights joined up with Kings Robb or Renly during the war, seeking both glory and employment. Before he became a Hedge Knight, Duncan was a gutter rat in Fleabottom, the poorest district of King's Landing. He's an orphan who never knew his parents, but suspects his father might have been a criminal. He hopes to visit the wall one day and see if there's a giant Night's Watchman who looks like him. By the way, Duncan is 6 feet 11 inches tall. That's almost 211 centimeters, or just over 2 meters. The show will begin with Dunk starting out in the world on his own. He's 16 or 17 years old, and he had been a squire for another Hedge Knight, an old man named Sir Arlen of Pennytree, ever since Arlen found him at the age of 5 or 6. Ira Parker is the Dunk and Egg showrunner. He's the Ryan Condal or Benioff and Weiss. Parker called Dunk plain, simple, and to the point. He's not flashy like a Daemon Targaryen or Jaime Lannister. So just like Duncan himself, the series won't have one of those epic, sprawling title sequences that we're used to. It'll just have a simple title card. The series won't feature the brilliant orchestral score of Ramin Djawadi either. Our new composer is Dan Romer, who has scored movies such as the live-action Lilo and Stitch and Pixar's Luca, and video games like Far Cry 5. I think we can expect Dunk and Egg to sound a bit simpler and lighthearted compared to GOT and Hot D. Romer's got enormous, shack-sized shoes to fill, but I'm willing to hear him out. With the absence of dragons and magic, Ira Parker compared Dunk and Egg to 14th century Britain. This is hard-nosed, grinded-out, gritty, medieval knights, cold with a really light, hopeful touch. It's a wonderful place to be. We are ground up in this series. We are starting right at the bottom. We're not with the lords and ladies, the kings and queens. In fact, Parker made a promise to George R.R. Martin that for the entire series, we'll never shift perspective to someone from the upper class. The whole time, we'll stick with Duncan the Tall and the lower rim of Westerosi society. Of course, we'll meet various Targaryens and Baratheons and such, but this isn't their story. To sum up Duncan's character, Parker said, "You don't exactly know the final destination, but you just keep at it. That's all Dunk has. That's his only superpower, and one foot in front of the other, he keeps going." To me, it sounds like Ira Parker has a perfect grasp on the story, but I was similarly hopeful during the early days of House of the Dragon. At the very least, I'm excited for Dunk and Egg to bring a change of identity for Thrones IP at HBO. A new type of story, new sounds, small scope. It could be great.
Best season ever!
In order to explain who everybody else is and what's going on, I think it'll be easier to just go through the most recent trailer shot by shot. Remember, just the basics, no spoilers. We open on 7 knights lined up on horseback. That's Lord Lionel Baratheon, the Laughing Storm. In Westeros, you can call for a trial of 7, sort of like a trial by combat, in order to prove a point. Famously, Maegor the Cruel was challenged to a trial of 7 by the warrior's sons when he usurped the Iron Throne, so that's what we're seeing here. Not Maegor, obviously. He lived 150 years ago. This is Prince Baelor Targaryen, also called Baelor Breakspear. He is heir to the Iron Throne, Hand of the King, and the eldest son of King Daeron II. I don't know if we're actually going to see Daeron, probably not, but here's the family tree at this point regardless. You can see that Aerion Brightflame is Baelor's nephew, son of Prince Maekar. Maekar and Baelor are both war heroes, because about 15 years before Dunk and Egg was the first Blackfire Rebellion. The brothers performed a famous military maneuver at the Battle of the Redgrass Field, whereby Maekar set up a shield wall that Baelor smashed the rebel army against. It's called the Hammer and the Anvil. Baelor the Hammer and Maekar the Anvil. Baelor wears a dagger on his belt, but the hilt looks different to the Valyrian steel prophecy dagger from House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones. Baelor, as heir to the throne, might possess it, or maybe it's just in the Red Keep. Here we see Dunk trying to sign up for the tourney, which is the whole point of this story. It's the tourney at Ashford Meadow to celebrate the unnamed Lord Ashford's unnamed daughter's 13th birthday. This guy is Sir Steffon Fossaway, and the guy he just kicked the wind out of is his cousin, Sir Raymond Fossaway. They live at Cider Hall, a castle in the Reach. Steffon is a jerk, but Raymond is cool, and he's friends with Dunk. This is Egg, named aptly for the eggness of his dome. He wants to be a squire, and Duncan is a squireless knight. This old dead fellow is Sir Arlen of Pennytree, that Hedge Knight who took Dunk on as his squire when he was even younger than Egg. This isn't a spoiler because I'm guessing it will be literally the first scene of the show. Arlen's death means that Dunk is now marching to the beat of his own drum. I don't know who these nice ladies are. They're dressed nicely, but they don't speak too nicely.
It's a hedge knight, ain't it? What? It's like a knight, but sadder.
I'm guessing they're sex workers seeking the knight's patronage, just based on their speech and how revealing this dress is for Westerosi nobility standards. They could also be mistresses of rich lords or knights, or perhaps they are ladies themselves. We see this servant guy stacking up firewood for them. Perhaps one is Jenna Dondarrion, Baelor's wife. Here's Baelor again in the middle, and his brother Maekar on the right, and Maekar's son Aerion on the far left. I'm not sure who this guy immediately behind Baelor is. Probably the unnamed Lord Ashford? Here Dunk is seeing the royal Targaryen party riding for Ashford. The standard bearers are bearing a very nice looking Targaryen standard, with a proper two-legged dragon. A bit different from the sigil in Hot D, but I like this one better. Young guy in the middle here is Prince Valar, Baelor's son. He's the heir's heir, basically. Pretty lady with pink hair is Kira of Tyrosh, who's Valar's Tyroshi wife. The rest of these folks are background actors, I think, just some random lords. Here Raymond is telling Dunk that the Targaryens are incestuous aliens, which is a conspiracy theory I can get behind. After all, where did dragons come from? Mutated from the volcanoes of Valyria? Or perhaps an ancient race of aliens found Planetos and landed on Valyria thousands of years ago with their spaceship.
Holy shit, I've just gone back in time.
Here's Prince Aerion in his armor for the tourney, and he's got himself a dagger too. Again, probably not the prophecy dagger though. If I was Daeron or Baelor, I wouldn't be trusting Aerion with that. Now here's a weird shot. Dunk's holding a decapitated head in a helmet with some plumage. Perhaps this is just the head from a statue, but what's Dunk holding it for? With the dark, rainy, shallow depth of field composition, I wonder if this might be a dream sequence. Dunk is supposed to meet Aerion's older brother, another Daeron, but I don't see him anywhere in the trailer. Daeron is a drunk and a dragon dreamer, sort of like Helena. Which armor goes harder, Aerion's or Daemon's? I'll still take Daemon's, I think. This shot is from a puppet show at the tourney. Maybe that head from earlier is just a burned prop from the puppet show. Here we see that Aerion uses a morning star like Criston Cole. This tilt appears to be the Humphrey-Humphrey matchup. Sir Humphrey Harding with the white and red sigil, and Sir Humphrey Beesbury with the black and yellow sigil. Humphrey Beesbury is a descendant of Lord Lyman Beesbury, who Criston impaled on a plate in House of the Dragon. This girl in the stands is probably the birthday girl, Lord Ashford's unnamed daughter. And that's pretty much it. As of right now, currently, and present day as you're watching this, George Martin has only written these 3 Dunk and Egg stories. But he planned to make a ton more, basically covering Dunk and Egg's entire lives. In 2015, he revealed the titles of at least 6 unwritten stories, giving our titular boys some adventures up in Winterfell, the Riverlands, and just about everywhere else. Tons of potential source material for Ira Parker to draw from, but don't count on reading those anytime soon. George Martin said, "There's no telling when I will have time to finish either of these, or which one I will write first. I don't expect I will know more until I've delivered The Winds of Winter." That was in 2014, 11 years ago. So if this HBO series is a hit, and they want to go beyond the 3 seasons it'll take to adapt the 3 stories that do exist, they'll either have to go off-book like Game of Thrones did, or George Martin will have to tell Ira Parker everything that happens, or George will have to finish the stories himself. Apparently, we're going to get a season of Dunk and Egg every year, meaning that Season 2 will come out in 2027. For 2026, we'll have Dunk and Egg from January 18th until February 22nd, and Season 3 of House of the Dragon will air in the summer. If that sounds exciting to you, please consider subscribing because I'll be covering all of it. I made Chris views for every episode of Hot D Season 2, and I'll probably just do that again for Dunk and Egg. And if you want to support me even further, I do have a Patreon, where you'll have access to these perks in exchange for $5 a month. Thanks for watching.